Hello everyone and welcome to the TradCast, the podcast that connects traditional archery enthusiasts. Today is episode number 12, and today in the show, I'm talking to Mike Kupetsky of Blue Ridge Flemish Strings, and we're talking all things traditional bowstrings. This is going to be a very enjoyable show. Let's jump right into it. Alright guys, welcome to this week's TradCast, the podcast that connects traditional archery enthusiasts. I've got another awesome show in store for you guys today. In a few moments, I'm going to be breaking over to a recent interview I had with Mike Kupetsky of Blue Ridge Flemish Strings. And Mike and I discussed some very important aspects of our traditional bowstrings and ways that you can properly maintain those. But before we get into that interview, I just wanted to give you guys a couple of updates. The first update I had for you guys is the fact that our weather here is finally improving in upstate New York. This past week we had a couple of days up into the upper 40s, low 50s even, and we had a lot of snow melt, and we've now got a lot of bare spots in our fields, and so our deer and turkeys and other animals are finally able to get back out to the fields and start getting a little bit extra food to carry them through the last couple of weeks of winter. So that's very encouraging. And I actually drove by one of my other properties on the way up here today, and of course there's a lot of bare spots in that field that borders my property, and there was like 15 or like 20 turkeys out in that field this morning eating in the winter ice. So very excited to start having some more warmer weather come through. I'm hoping in the next week or two that we have all of our snow melt and I can get outside and start shooting my bows outdoors and start getting ready for spring turkey season. Now, the second update I had for you guys is, well, it's more or less a reminder, but for anybody who might be just tuning into the show this week, or for anybody who's been tuning in throughout the weeks, if you want to listen to the podcast in an audio-only version, you can do that by tuning in on either Podomatic.com or you can find us on iTunes. And all you have to do is simply search the TradCast and we should pop up so you can listen to us in an audio-only version. And the only other update I had for you guys this week is I just wanted to share with you something that I've learned in my own shooting this past week. Actually, a couple of days ago. Just for a little background information, the past 4 months that I've been shooting my traditional bows, when I've been shooting, I grip my string 3 under, and that's what feels most comfortable for me. That's what I like to do. That's what works for me. So I'm a 3 under shooter. But when I'm gripping my string, what I had been doing up until a couple of days ago is I kept my thumb in an upright fashion. So as I was drawing, I was holding my thumb upright. All right. And a couple of days ago, I wasn't even thinking about it. I don't even know why I did it. I just did it. But I actually took my thumb and I tucked it down towards my palm. And of course I shot and I was like, whoa, what just happened there? And it just, because it felt different. And I was like, wait a minute. I had my thumb, tucked down towards my palm. And it felt good. And I made a good shot. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna keep trying that. So the last couple of days, every shot I've taken, I've been shooting with my thumb down as opposed to being up. And just that simple change, just something as simple as, adjusting my thumb position while I'm gripping the string, I'm noticing is making a pretty big difference in my shot accuracy and in my consistency. And just, honestly, and just how it feels. To me, now that I've shot that way several times, it just feels more comfortable. So I'm going to keep on doing that. Now, that might be something that a lot of you guys are already doing, and maybe I'm behind the curve on that, but if anybody out there is not doing that, maybe you'll want to give it a try and see if it'll work for you. I mean, I don't know, it may not, but it's something that I've noticed is working for me, and it's something that I'm going to keep on doing, and I just wanted to share that with you guys here on today's podcast. So that's pretty much it for updates, guys. now we're going to jump into a recent interview I had with Mike Kupetsky over at Blue Ridge Flemish Strings, where Mike breaks down and discusses the importance of our bowstrings, how to make those, how to choose the right one for our bow, and the importance of maintaining that bowstring for a long-lasting life and for better shooting. I hope everybody enjoys this interview. I know I certainly did. All right, everyone. Like I mentioned, we've got a special guest on the line tonight. I'm interviewing Mike Kupetsky, the owner of Blue Ridge Flemish Strings, and we are going to be discussing all things strings for your traditional bows. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Okay, Chad. Well, thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Well, Mike, I wanted to start this show off the way we have most every other show, and that's I wanted to have you give the listeners a little bit of background about yourself, how you got into traditional archery, and then I wanted to have you discuss a little bit on how Blue Ridge Flemish Strings got started and the current goals of the company.
Okay. Well, I got into traditional archery when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. I actually found a longbow that was missing a string, and I used my Boy Scout skills to make up a string for it, something really rough with just, regular twine or whatever, and I made the string up and got some cheap arrows and started shooting. And I was probably about 7 when I started that. And my dad saw how much I liked it, and for my 8th birthday, he bought me a Browning Challenger 1, I believe it was. Recurve bow was 25 pounds, and I've been pretty much shooting ever since. I've gone through a lot of recurves early on, and then compounds came about back in the late 70s, early 80s, and I got into that for a while, and probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I got back into traditional, and pretty much that's all I do now is traditional archery.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, as you know, I'm new to the traditional archery realm myself. I'm a lifelong compound shooter, but I'm certainly really loving, my transition so far to the traditional side of things. So, Mike, I'm just kind of wondering, how many years of traditional archery experience would you say that you've got under your belt?
Let's see, I probably have right about 43, almost 44 years. I'll be 51 in the spring. So, yep, 44 years. Been shooting recurves, longbows, and compounds. I never really left traditional archery, but I kind of got heavy on the compound side. I always had recurves and longbows and kind of played with them, but just in the last 4 or 5 years here, I've just given up compounds altogether and gone 100% traditional, and it's just so much more fun. It's much more challenging. It's it's a much greater sport, I believe, with with traditional.
Yeah, that's what I'm finding out now. This isn't a question that I've gotten on the list here for you, and it just kind of came up. But I'm just kind of curious: is there any particular reason why you've kind of made that complete switch to traditional here the last 4 or 5 years, or is it kind of like you mentioned, the more challenging and more fun?
Mostly because of the challenge, I would say. I mean, I hunted for a long time with compounds, and I probably have well over 100 deer under my belt with a compound. And it just kind of got to be, the same old thing. If I got out there in a tree stand and had the opportunity to get a deer to stand still for even a second, it was pretty much game over. So, I was looking for more of a challenge, and I just kind of like the way the the recurves and the longbows look. They just looked so neat to me, and I never really spent that much time with them in those middle years. But lately I just really fell in love with them again, and started buying and selling and trading, and it's amazing how many guys out there do the same thing I do. They'll buy bows and try them out. If they don't like them, they'll sell them and trade them for something else, or the list is going on and on. I would say in the past 4 to 5 years, I have bought, sold, and or traded at least 30 traditional bows, if not more.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, it's kind of neat to just see what's out there, because they're all different. They're all made with different woods. They have different styles. Every one is different. So you could own 100 of them, and no two would really be alike. It's kind of a neat thing. And it's kind of the reason I switched, really.
Awesome. Well, that's a great story. Yeah, I mean, I just know, like you said, I mean, when you think about it, a traditional bow is a pretty simple thing. It's a stick and a string, but like you said, I wouldn't even want to try to wager a guess at how many different bows are out there in the market.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
There's a lot of good bow employers out there. A lot of smaller time guys too who make really great equipment. They're not real well known, and you just got to get out there and look and see what's available. There's something for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. Well, awesome. Well, Mike, I also wanted to have you tell the listeners a little bit about Blue Ridge Flemish Strings and how the company got started and kind of what's currently going on with the company.
Okay. Probably when I got back into traditional seriously 4 or 5 years ago, just started thinking about different things that I could do to make some of my own equipment, and whether it be quiver or tabs or strings. And I saw a few videos about guys making their own strings, and I said, well, that looks really cool. Maybe I'd like to try that. So I originally built, after watching a bunch of videos, I've built a endless loop jig, which is a string that is served at both ends, and it kind of lends itself a little more towards target. Not till a year or so later did I get involved in making the Flemish, and I pretty much did it just for myself, just so I can make my own strings. I can have a bunch of different colors. I could change things around to match with the different bows and the woods in those bows, so kind of color coordinate, the strings, so to speak, to match the bow that I was using. And pretty soon I had, friends saying, hey, can you make one for me? Yeah, sure, no problem. So I started making one for this guy and making one for that guy, and found out that I could, start to sell these things and actually get a little of my money back, and that was my main goal in the beginning. But now I'm kind of looking at it as a side business for me. That's what it is right now, and we're trying to grow it through social media. I'm on Facebook. I got a page just for the strings, and got quite a bit of business that way. And I go to some of the local shoots and promote it that way. And it's been doing well.
Very good. And just so everybody knows, I'm going to be leaving a link in the show notes with a link over to Blue Ridge Flemish Strings Facebook page. Mike, do you have a web page also, or?
Not at this time. I've been thinking about doing that, but just kind of seeing how things go, and don't want to get too big too fast, so to speak. So I kind of have a customer base right now. I have repeat customers that have used me. They bought a string from me, and then when they need something else, they start calling me, and they're referring me to their friends. So that's kind of building that way. So I think in the near future, I would consider doing a web page.
Very nice. Okay. Well, the first main question that I had for you, Mike, I wanted to have you touch on the different types of traditional bowstrings there are out there, different materials. And then I wanted to have you also touch on some of the advantages and disadvantages of each of those string types.
Okay, well, as traditional archers, we basically have two choices for our recurves and our longbows. We have endless loop, and we have Flemish twist. That's the two styles of string that we commonly use. There is a third where it's kind of like a Flemish string, but it's actually braided on the end, and it's adjustable for length. But it's kind of in the hinterland. It's not really very commonly used. It's probably more on the lines of what a lot of the self-bow guys would do. So anyway, with the two that we have, the Flemish twist seems to lend itself better to traditional archery in the way that it handles on the bow and the way that it looks on the bow, as opposed to the endless loop would probably lend itself more to target archery or FIDA or Olympic style shooting. So those are basically the two choices of style of string that we have.
Okay, very nice. Now, could you touch on some advantages that each one has over the other, if there are any?
I think from what I've seen, it's just kind of personal preference. I'm finding more and more, because there are guys who shoot self bows and long bows and recurves that are very much traditional, that use an endless loop string. In fact, some very good shooters that I compete with, they have all the garb and, the back quivers and all that stuff and buckskin jackets, but they use the endless loop, which to me is more towards target style. And then there's guys who do Olympic style shooting and have a FIDA bow set up with, a 25-inch riser and ILF limbs and sights and stabilizers and all that stuff, and they kind of prefer Flemish twist. So are there advantages one to the other? The guys who shoot the endless loop will tell you that they're a faster string, and the guys that shoot the Flemish will tell you that they're more traditional, and they're much quieter, and they're much more forgiving on the bow. I haven't found any of that information to actually be true and to hold what the guys say, because I kind of go cross back and forth between the different styles, and I really just think it comes down to what's your personal preference, what kind of string do you like, and once you get involved in shooting traditional for a while, you kind of find your little niche of what style you like to do. And basically, that's what you're going to pick down the road. I mean, it could be one, it could be the other. It doesn't really matter. There is no right or wrong. So as far as advantages, I really don't think that there's much in the way of advantage. I just think it's personal preference.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that's like one common theme that I'm really liking about the traditional archery world is, like you said, all of this stuff really kind of boils down to personal preference, and there's really not any right or wrong answer in any particular discipline or aspect of traditional archery. It's kind of what works for you,
Right.
And I'm certainly enjoying that myself. Now, Mike, another question that I had for you is I just wanted to have you discuss some things that all traditional archers can do out there to take care of our strings and make sure that we're getting the most out of our strings and the longest lifespan possible out of our strings.
Basically, that boils down, string care is pretty easy. Although, as easy as it is, I now notice, because I make strings, that nobody does it. The one thing that you need to do to your string, which is very simple, is to keep wax on it. They sell wax everywhere. Everywhere that sporting goods stuff is sold, that archery stuff is sold, you can buy bow wax. There's a bunch of different kinds of bow wax. There's natural beeswax. There's a bunch of different man-made configurations of wax that, there again, you got to find what you like, what works for you, I have a favorite that I use when I'm making strings, and I use the same one to keep the string waxed, after I make it, and it's on my bow. But even as easy as that is, it's pretty funny. I kind of go to the shoots, and everybody's got their bows lined up, and now I'm not looking at the bows. I'm looking at the strings, because I've been making the strings and selling them, and I just carry the wax around with me, and I hand it to my buddies and say, "Here, you need to wax that thing because it's getting all frayed or whatever." And that's pretty much what it comes down to. If you keep the string waxed, at the minimum, you should probably replace your string once a year, just on a safety standpoint, because you just never know when it's going to let go. But I've had strings last for years, and even more than years. I've had strings on bows that were 10 or 15 years old, and if you take care of them, it will last. I think it's a good practice to probably replace it once a year if you do any amount of shooting. If you only shoot a little bit in the fall before season, and then you hunt with it, well, that string will probably last you the rest of your life. If you're like yourself or myself, I shoot every day. So in the course of a year, I probably shoot 5, 6, 7,000 shots, if not more. So I'm probably going to replace my string a little more often than some guys.
Right. Yeah, I've been shooting my bow every day since I got into traditional archery, and like I said, I'm not shooting a lot, but I'm shooting anywhere from 15 to 50 arrows a day.
Yeah. That's what you got to do to keep in tune.
Yeah. Now, a couple follow-up questions I had for you about waxing our strings. Now, what's your opinion as far as how often I should wax my string?
I go by, on the Flemish twist, the ends of the end of the string where your loops are, you have tag ends where the string was made that are going to stick out. When those start to show, I throw some more wax on it. On the endless loop, it's much harder because you don't see anything that catches your eye. So, I mean, if you shoot once a week, it wouldn't hurt you to throw a little wax on each time before you shoot, or if you take it out once a month. I would probably go with that rule. It may be once a day for some people, but the people that shoot once a day are shooting a lot of arrows, so therefore you want to keep it waxed more than the guy that goes out once a week or once a month. So I would probably say, whenever you take that bow out to go out, give it a look over. And if you see any of those tag ends sticking out on the Flemish twist, give it a little wax. It only takes a second.
Okay. Now, Mike, for anybody else out there, including myself here, could you further explain what you're talking about when you're referring to these tag ends?
When you make a Flemish twist string, you start. Let's say we're going to make a 60-inch string. We have to account for the loops on each end and the twisting, the Flemish twist in each end, so that takes a little space. So we're going to make our strands probably 10 inches extra or 8 inches extra on each end. So when we do that, we're dealing with a straight strand that we take 2 bundles of, say, 7 strands in each side, and we're going to make 2 bundles out of that, and we're going to take those 2 bundles and we're going to twist them together, and we're going to make a loop on the end. So you have the very ends of the strands of your string, they have to end somewhere. So they end in the braid that creates your loop. So they're going to stick out. There's no two ways about it. They're going to stick out of one braid, whether it's the braid above, the braid below. They have to stick out somewhere because they have to end, which is different from the endless loop. You're taking one piece of string and you're wrapping it around the jig in a continuous loop. That's why they call it endless loop. So that you may go 14 times around your jig. It gives you a 14-strand string or a 16-strand, whatever you want. So you basically only have 2 ends on an endless loop, you have the beginning and you have the end. And those are covered up with serving on the loop end. And then you serve the center where your knock point goes. So you never see, on an endless loop, you never see the tag ends. On the Flemish twist, you see all of them because they're sticking out on the end. And I normally keep them, probably about 1/4 of an inch. I'll cut those off, but you wax them down and they make, one nice neat bundle, and you really don't notice that they're there until your string needs a little wax, gets a little dry. Then you'll start to see them sticking out. They kind of look like a little cactus sticking out on the ends. They're about every 1/2 inch. You'll have a strand of string sticking out. So that's what the tag ends would be.
Okay, well
Good indicator. Good indicator also. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
A good indicator when to put some wax on. When you see those sticking out, hey, it's time to get this thing lubed up a little bit, and because the wax kind of it binds it together. I almost want to say it gives it some strength. It's kind of like the mortar between the bricks. It helps a lot. So you want to use it.
Right. I appreciate you taking the time to clear that up for us. I was kind of just a little bit confused what you meant by there, but that certainly cleared it up. One more follow-up question, Mike, on the waxing end. Now, I've often heard that from other people that if you're out shooting in the rain, or if you're spending a couple days in a row hunting in the rain, that you should wax your bowstring every day if you're taking it out in that weather. Would you agree with that, or do you think that's something we could pass on?
No, you should definitely do that. Keeping it waxed is going to basically make it water repellent at least. It's not waterproof. So that's good that you keep it waxed up like that if you're out in the rain. And when you do get back, obviously you want to get your bow somewhere where it's dry and warmer, and probably take the string off and make sure that gets dried, and dry your bow out well, and take care of your bow as well, because especially with the wooden bows, you just definitely don't want the moisture to get to those. I don't believe that the string materials are all pretty space age stuff that I don't really think they're going to absorb moisture. But what they will do is your string will become heavy with water, and when you do shoot it, you're gonna see a lot of water fly from your string as well as from your feathers that are going to absorb moisture. So you want to kind of keep that out of there. It's not gonna do any good, that's for sure.
Right, and I could see that kind of affecting the shot characteristics of your shooting, probably.
Absolutely.
As well. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, Mike, I also wanted to have you explain for the listeners some of the techniques and equipment needed for the person that wants to maybe get started making their own bowstrings.
Okay. As far as the Flemish twist are probably the easiest as far as equipment-wise would go. I made, for the first 2 or 3 years, I never used a jig to make a Flemish string. I measured my first strand, I cut it to the length I needed, and then when I get my second strand, I put it next to the first, and I make it a 1/2 inch shorter on each end, so my ends are nice and tapered and staggered. And you could do this completely by hand. They make Flemish string jigs, which you can buy at just about any of the archery wholesalers, whether it be Three Rivers, Lancaster, or wherever. It's basically a simple board with dowel pins in one end and little brad nails in the other end. And you can use that to basically lay out your 2 bundles, because you're going to use at least 2 bundles, if not 3 bundles, to make your string. So what the jig is doing for you is helping you make your bundles quicker. You still need to put that string together by hand. So every Flemish string that you see was built by hand. There's only one way that I know of to do it, and that's to twist it up with your hands. An endless loop is a little more involved, especially on the equipment end, because you have to either make or buy a and the jigs for those they could range up to $1,000 for an endless loop jig. They get kind of crazy. I made my own out of Unistrut and some aluminum bar stock and things like that, and it actually came out pretty well. It works really well. I've seen guys make them out of nothing but wood. So it depends on what you want to do, and YouTube is full of videos on how to make the string jig for the endless loop, or the jig board. It's basically a board for a Flemish twist. So if you're interested in getting started making those, it's pretty straightforward with the jig. The way you lay it out, depending on the length of your string, basically makes the two bundles for you, and then you need to twist them up by hand.
Very nice. Mike, I just got a follow-up question there. How long, is there any rule of thumb, like how much experience do you think a guy needs to have, or a girl needs to have, before they're going to get, good at maybe making their own strings to trust putting those on their own bows?
Well, I can tell you what it took me. I'm a fairly quick learner, but I probably messed around for a week or two before I got one to actually come out the way it's supposed to. Once I did that, then I can actually sit here and look at it and dissect what I did, and still watching. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos on how to do this. It's a great resource. So if anybody's interested in learning how to do that, I would suggest they start right there. There's also a lot of DVDs available commercially if you're interested in doing that. I know Three Rivers carry some, but once you get it together, and you'll know that it's right, because it looks like all the rest that you buy commercially. Go ahead and put it on your bow, try it out. Start slow, draw your bow halfway, check it out, look at the ends, make sure nothing's coming loose, and you got to try it to know. So that's pretty much all the advice I could give you for that.
Right. So it pretty much comes down to almost like a trial and error process, basically.
Yeah, pretty much is. It's you either get it and you do it right, or you don't quite understand the process, and you'll know right away that it didn't come out right, because you're going to end up with something that just doesn't look like it's supposed to. And when you put it on the bow, it's probably going to come loose before you even draw the bow back. Right. Yeah. I've given some thought to maybe down the road trying to get into making my own strings for my bows, but haven't really gotten too involved with the process yet, and I just really was just kind of curious, if there was any kind of standards to how long it took to kind of get comfortable doing that. Yeah, I really haven't talked to too many other people that started doing this, so I really only have my own experience to go on. But it's not that difficult. And like now, I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, and if I'm in a hurry, I can make a string in 15 minutes, start to finish, pre-stretching it and serving it, and probably not putting silencers on, but the string would be complete in about 15 minutes or so.
Wow, very cool. Okay, well, Mike, I've got one last question for you, and if I'm the guy or if I'm the gal out there that's my bowstring is getting kind of worn out and I want to put a new string on my bow, what are some considerations that you want to think about when you're looking to select a new string for your bow?
All right. We again have pretty much we're down to 2 choices. Just like we had 2 choices for the style of string, we have 2 choices when it comes to the string itself. We either have a fast light compatible bow, or we don't. So pretty much all self bows, which are made from a single stave of wood, those would require a B50 or B55, which are pretty much the only 2 materials that you could use on on bows that don't have extra laminations on the limb tips. Any of the fast light materials, there's so many. It's you have Brownell makes materials and BCY makes material, and they all make, you know, dozens of different brands, so to speak. They're all pretty much fast light material. They coined that term, fast light. If you don't have a bow with extra laminations on your limb tip, you can't even consider those. So you're going to have to go with, you know, the old school B50. It's a little twangier, I believe. A lot of people think it's quieter. I don't really find it to be quieter. It's definitely slower, but it is also much easier on your bow. All of the fast light type materials, they're basically made out of Kevlar and or Kevlar, you know, variants type materials. They're super strong. The D97 that I started using a while ago, that has a break strength of 125 pounds per strand. So one little tiny strand, which I forget, I think it's 14,000th of an inch, is a 125-pound test. So it's not very forgiving is what I'm getting at. You know, when you put that on an older bow, you have to take special precautions, building up padding the limb, the loops, so that you don't put so much shock on the end of the bow, because you'll just split the limbs. I've seen them where they're split right down the center. So here again, we only have two choices. We either have a fast light compatible bow, or we don't. If we do, then we have many choices as to string material that we could use, and multiple companies that we can choose from. And it all comes down to trying different ones, seeing which ones work better for you. Some are better for harsher environments where they get a lot of abrasion. Some are better for target shooters. Some are better for hunters. They're all very similar, and they're made of similar materials. And what they'll do is they'll combine materials. They'll take Vectran and they'll take Dyneema, and they'll combine it in different percentages, and they'll come up with a new bowstring, newest, latest, greatest thing on the market. Well, they're all pretty much made of the same type of material, so you kind of got to weed through. And you know, if you really get into the traditional archery thing, you're going to be trying different strings. You're going to seek out custom string builders, and you're going to know that this string is made with whatever material. You're not just going to say, "Hey Joe, I want a string for my bow. I don't know what it's made of. I don't care," because you're going to know. You're going to get into it, and then once you get to that point, then you can start to make a decision as to, well, this 450 plus, this worked really well for me, but I didn't like the 8125, or I like D97, but BCYX, I didn't care too much for. So it's, you know, kind of like asking a golfer what the best set of clubs are. You know, you're going to get a different answer from 10 different guys.
Right, I can certainly see where that would be the case. Now, so I just want to confirm, and you know, for anybody who's listening tonight, Mike, who maybe is just getting started out with traditional archery, or maybe who hasn't ever shot a traditional bow. So essentially, if your bow does not have the extra lamination on the tip ends, you cannot shoot fast flight strings. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, and if your bow is equipped with those extra laminations, then you can shoot the fast flight strings.
Right. The best thing that they can do is to look at the literature that came with their bow. If they bought their bow used, because I don't know, when people call me up and say I have such and such a bow, I'm not familiar with every single bow made, so I have to go to the manufacturer's website, and it'll tell you right there, if he's putting a fast flight string on his particular bow, if it's a custom bow or if it's a production bow, it'll be on their website. So if the factory's doing or the custom bowyer is doing it, then you'll know. If I can tell by looking at the bow if it has extra laminations, but not everybody can look at the end of a bow and say, especially guys that are just starting out, they're not going to know one from another. So I would say, look at the manufacturer, ask the manufacturer, and as long as they say it's good, then it's good.
Yeah, that's why I had you kind of just, re-follow up with that, because when I first got my first traditional bow was my used Bear Grizzly recurve, and
Right.
I was actually chatting with a buddy of mine who's been shooting traditional for a while, and like I said, I wasn't aware at the time that I couldn't have shot fast flight strings with that Bear Grizzly, which I cannot do.
Right, right.
So,
and there again, Bear, the Bear Company used to be in Grayling, Michigan. So if you have an older Bear that was made in Grayling, Michigan, I can tell you hands down it is not fast flight compatible. If you have a newer Bear that is made in Gainesville, Florida, it is fast flight compatible, except for I think one model or two models that they make do not have reinforced limb tips. So you could see how crazy it could get with 2,000 different bow companies making bows, and all the different custom guys out there making bows for people. You really got to ask the guy that made the bow, or go to the company and look at how they designed the bow, because you will damage the limbs. There's people that say, hey, I do it. I shoot fast flight on an old bow. I take lots of precautions. I pad the loops, which means padding the loops means adding extra strands of material in the loop area so that it's more cushioned for shock. They do things like put Velcro or moleskin padding underneath where the on the limb tips to take a little shock up. But if it was my hand-me-down bow from my great-granddad or something like that, and it was important to me, I wouldn't take a chance that I'm going to damage something that I wanted to keep. So you got to kind of think of it that way, because it can happen, and you won't know it's going to happen until it's done. It's over. Your top limb or your bottom limb is split right down to the handle. So. Yeah,
excellent point there. Well, Mike, I appreciate you taking the time this evening to explain that information to the listeners. I just wanted to have you finish out with one more time, just telling the listeners where they can go to learn more about Blue Ridge Flemish Strings.
We're on Facebook at Blue Ridge Flemish Strings, and hopefully I will be doing a website soon, and if I do, I will pass that information along. But Facebook is probably the best place to look me up. I do most of my business there.
Okay, very nice. Yes, I'll be including a link to your Facebook page in the show notes, and if you get that website up and going, pass that info along and we'll update the show notes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thanks again, Mike. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, take care. Alright guys, well there you have it. Just a look back at my recent interview I had with Mike Kupetsky over at Blue Ridge Flemish Strings. I appreciate Mike taking the time to break down that information for us here on the podcast. I hope everybody picked up a few tips and a few tactics that they can employ in choosing their bowstrings and in maintaining their bowstrings. If anybody wants to check out more information about Blue Ridge Flemish Strings, or to check out their lineup, or maybe contact Mike about ordering one of his bowstrings, you can find him on Facebook, and I'm going to be leaving a link to Blue Ridge Flemish Strings here in the show notes. So if you guys want to check out more about Mike's strings, you can find him over there at Blue Ridge Flemish Strings here on Facebook. And again, I want to thank Mike for taking the time for being a guest on today's show. And the only other reminder I have for you guys is, if you enjoy what we've been doing here in the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you could take just a few moments, go on over to iTunes, leave us a quick review, let us know what you think of the show. It's a great way to not only help more people locate and find the podcast, help us expand our audience, but it's also going to be a great way for me to get future guests here on the show, so that they can share their information with all of us and help us all become better traditional shooters, better bow hunters, and all around better outdoorsmen. But as always, I want to thank everybody who took the time to tune into this week's show. I'm going to see you next weekend right here on an all-new episode of the TradCast.